Good morning. I'm Reverend Michelle Scott-Huffman. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the minister here at First UU. I am a middle-aged, typically pale skin, also more sunburnt than normal because AJ and I were in a similar place this weekend where there was sunshine. It's lovely. I am today wearing a red plaid shirt and some gray pants and glasses, and happy to be here with you. So earlier this week, I read a piece from UU minister Reverend Jennifer Nordstrom saying that interdependence invites us into covenant. As we come together today, exploring the web of community, I'd like to kind of expand that to say interdependence acknowledges our existence in community and invites us into covenant together. So I've heard over my lifetime, and particularly many times in the last 15 years or so, that I've been doing the work of ministry and spend much of my days looking for relevant quotes and pieces and tidbits that end up in sermons on Sunday mornings. As it turns out, Sunday just keeps rolling around week after week after week. So anyway, I've heard this particular quote in different iterations many times, and it's essentially, we can't be human alone. So it's found in various religious and non-religious teachings, including the South African concept behind the greeting Sawubona, which maybe you have heard at some point. The tribal greeting Sawubona has often been translated as "I see you." But there's this really great video by the Global Oneness Project featuring Orland Bishop, who himself is a South African man, and he explains a deeper meaning. He says that the meaning of the greeting Sawubona is "we see you," even when it's uttered by a single person standing alone, explaining that the "we" includes me, my ancestors, the divinities that are a part of the celestial spheres of reality, and my spiritual self. And so as I come into contact with a person and say Sawubona, all of that comes into play for the I that sees the person that I'm seeing. The response then is Yebu Sawubona, yes, we see you too. And so you can imagine this collection of ancestors and support systems around a person coming into contact with another person who has this other sort of system of ancestors and support and divinities, and all of that is seeing each other in the moment of meeting. What a beautiful idea. A multitude of complexity that I embody when I see you and prepare to talk with you. Bishop says, seeing is a dialogue. It establishes you as a witness to some phenomenon. It is an invitation to participate in the life of another, to investigate our shared potential. And so as we come into church spaces, we often come investigating our shared potential. In this understanding, not only can we not be human alone outside of relationship to other living humans, we can't be human without the complex histories of our ancestors and all of the webs of their relationships along the way. In preparation for our conversation today, I went digging around to find out more about who may have said you can't be human alone over time. And I came across many fascinating stories about Maggie Kuhn, to whom this quote was attributed at one time. It's actually the title of a book that she wrote. You'll find here a little later that Maggie Kuhn's gift was not naming things as far as giving it titles. So the book is You Can't Be Human Alone, Handbook on Group Procedures for the Local Church. Now, Maggie worked for the United Presbyterian Church until she was forced into retirement by turning age 65. She died in April of 1995 at the age of 89 after more than 2 decades of advocacy and activism. She had felt this profound sadness and anger at having to retire at age 65, which was at that time the mandatory retirement age. Out of her anger and sadness, she gathered together with some friends and formed something called the Gray Panthers. The Gray Panthers, the original name that was chosen was the Consultation of Older and Younger Adults for Social Change. Fortunately, Maggie had a friend who was in the sort of media business and said, that's not a good name. You should be the Gray Panthers. And in the end, that would be an appropriate name. The Gray Panthers would work with the Black Panthers in many cases and causes throughout those early years. So this consultation, the Gray Panthers aimed to build an intergenerational movement that would work to stop ageism and a campaign on behalf of social justice. So eventually there would be more than 100,000 members in 32 states and over half a dozen countries. And there are still about 20 or so active chapters of the Gray Panthers. One of them is headquartered in Kansas City. The current vision statement of the Gray Panthers of New York City is the Gray Panthers envisions a world where old and young have much to contribute to make our society more just and humane, and in which each reinforces the goals, strategy, and action of the other. So today, as we imagine the ways that we might strengthen our own web of community, I want to offer 5 bits of wisdom from Maggie Kuhn as wisdom from and for the web of community. The first is this: it is imperative that we form an intergenerational movement to address the issues that we face. For Kuhn, those issues included the Vietnam War, racism, discrimination against LGBTQ people, and other marginalized populations that would face discrimination over time. They found that the way to best address the issues that they were facing as communities was for people of all generations to come together and to address that together, to share the wisdom of those who had lived for many decades and the energy of those who were just coming up in this space of advocacy and activism, and children running around and learning the language of social justice in that space. What a beautiful experience of intergenerational community together. When I look out in this sanctuary at little humans who are singing the songs and saying the words and experiencing some of what we're experiencing here, and see older adults who have been in this sanctuary for generations, I'm so thrilled that we also understand the importance of intergenerational work. Not that we're separated in different spaces all the time, but sometimes we come together to do the work of justice and community in the same space because we need each other. We need each other. The second tidbit that I'd like to offer from Maggie Kuhn is: a society that discards those who do not produce will itself be discarded. Now, this is applicable, obviously, to older adults who come to the end of a career, perhaps, and find themselves in a different way of being in the world, but it's not applicable only to older adults. It's applicable to people all across the span of ages and experiences who, for different reasons, don't produce in the way this capitalistic society would require of us. And so when we are intergenerational community together and we are holding one another up and supporting one another, sometimes there are people who won't produce in the way that adds labor and production and, money to the economy. But their existence with us gives us different gifts. And so it is that in intergenerational community that takes care of each other, we take up that bit of slack that might be left in the sort of production line. Hopefully, we might also just say we don't quite need so much production, but also that we can hold these things together, that we don't discard people who don't produce enough or don't produce at all for whatever reason that may be. The next one is fear of strangers. Fear makes strangers of people who would be friends. There was a great event yesterday in Phelps Grove Park called Spring Spark. People walked up and said, "What is this?" And I was like, I don't know. And I've been on the planning committee, actually. But it's just this idea that we need to be together in community more, that we need to play together, that we need to listen to music and dance and sing together and blow bubbles in the park together and take these little wands with ribbons and dance with them, right? And so that was happening yesterday in Phelps Grove Park. And there were like individuals and families and small groups of people that knew each other, but for the most part, people didn't. And they came together in this space and they played together. And it was so beautiful. And I think of the ways that people left that space with new friends yesterday. And also the ways that sometimes we enter into those kinds of spaces with a little bit of fear. And that we don't know how to connect with each other. And so we sort of just exist in our little bubble and then we leave. And we could have made friends, but we didn't. And so it is that our fear makes strangers of people who would otherwise be friends. The next one is power should not be concentrated in the hands of so few, and powerlessness in the hands of so many. We have a tenuous relationship with power. We've seen it abused in our lives. And for the most part, sometimes as justice-seeking, kind of liberal-leaning people, we don't want to have anything to do with it because it's been misused. The reality is that power is a neutral thing, that power is the ability to make something happen, and it can be used for great good. And sometimes we need some motivation or some encouragement to step into our power. And so Maggie Kuhn comes to the end of her career. She's angry that she doesn't get to do the work that she didn't feel like she was done doing, that she still had work in her that she wanted to offer to the world. And she got kind of pushed into the space of retirement and was angry about it and realized that even in trying to change that thing, that she was up against this great system of power in which the power was concentrated in the hands of a few. One of the things that she used to say was that you should do at least one outrageous thing a week. So there's a great interview with her and a rather young Terry Gross on Fresh Air. And they're having this conversation and Terry says, I know that you say that you should do one outrageous thing a week. So what's an outrageous thing that you have done lately? And she said, well, I keep writing Ronnie Reagan these notes. So whatever the outrageous thing is that we are feeling called to do in a moment, we should be encouraged to do that because that is us taking hold of the power and taking it out of the concentration of just a few hands. The last one that I want to share is stand before those you fear and speak your mind, even if your voice shakes. So often we find ourselves called to spaces where we feel like we don't belong. I love the time that I worked in the state capitol and hosted people, teachers especially, coming in for lobby days and was able to say, no, actually, you can just walk right in this office and you can say what you need to say to the legislator who needs to listen to their constituent, right? There's something about standing in that fear and doing the thing anyway. Speaking your truth, speaking a truth to someone who needs to hear it, even if your voice shakes. And in those places where power has been concentrated, those who hold the power will use that against you. They will draw attention to the fact that your voice shakes. And rather than being deterred by that and sent away, Maggie Kuhn would suggest that we stand proud of the shakiness of our voice in that space and our willingness to stand in our fear and to do it anyway, to do what needs to be done. And so as we, an intergenerational community, stand in this place where there is much happening in our world that we would like to see changed. There is much work to be done to bring justice and inclusion and love to all the people who need and want to experience that. I invite us to lean into some of this wisdom today. Some of the wisdom of one older adult who lived a wonderful life and shared pieces of that with us so that we might learn to be together in community and to lift up all voices so that we can recognize our interdependence as community and also come into what I mentioned at the very beginning, this sense of living in covenant together as intergenerational, interdependent community. I want to close with a poem written by Maggie Kuhn. It's called Vineyard's Life Cycle. We've grown from the same root. We stick together like a grape bunch until a final decision is made. Stay in our bunch and enjoy our company. Grow older, you can become finer, a Chardonnay or Sauvignon. A finer wine made from the roots you grew up in, combined through the years with accomplishments and fermentations. Grafted with different grapes, splitting the vine, penetrating the other vine through the two diagonal cuts, the vintner assembles the vine, bonding the two vines to produce something totally different. So you will take another. As the two vines joined are maturing faster, they will lose strength. So our lives embraced together will. Now their days of bearing fruit are over. The young branch must bear the weight of production. So is this life cycle. I was going to say lifestyle. That's not what I meant to say. So is this life cycle. And so today, friends, let's rejoice in the fact that we get to do life together and that we become this intertwined vine that produces fine wine, that produces tasty fruit, that produces a way of being together in community that is life-giving for all. May it be so.